So once we've actually measured the amount of emissions that we're creating, we have to do something about them. And there is a lot of stuff that we can do. I'll do a little mea culpa. I actually work with Greenpeace, and most people know Greenpeace for hanging banners and doing that sort of thing, but we also spend a lot of time, money, and effort in doing research. And Greenpeace has put together a project called the Energy Revolution, and we've been doing studies and reports on emission reduction plans around the world. And today we have Keith Stewart, who's going to come up and talk to us a little bit about the Energy Revolution project that we've been working on. And you'll also find on your seats a lovely little flyer that has some strategies for what we can do. So Keith Stewart, the climate and energy campaigner from Greenpeace Toronto.
When I first fell in love with my now wife and we got married, we moved to a little apartment behind the Pizza at High Park and Dundas West. And my wife was very involved in actually sort of replanting one of the parks just behind Axis, sort of north there. And my job was to dig where I was told to dig and not dig where I was supposed to dig. And I tried to follow instructions as closely as possible. You know, there's a lot of involvement in this community then, and I'm glad to see it's carrying on now. And I've gone to a lot of meetings with a lot of people who tell me that these things can't be done. And so I'm going to take this story the next time I go, because I've always been reliably assured by informed people who work in the energy industry that you can't get people to reduce their consumption. The only thing you can do is try and dig this stuff out of the ground faster to give them more and more. And I think to have whole groups coming together like this, communities coming together to take these kinds of actions are key. And they're also, they add up. And so the energy revolution, so you've got a little orange booklet, which is sort of how the energy revolution relates to what you can do in your home, in your community, in your workplace. But you can go online and Google energy revolution. We've actually put together a global strategy. We sort of said, okay, what would it take to actually achieve the reductions in pollution that the scientists say are necessary to avoid the worst effects of global warming? We worked with the renewable energy industry and the German Aerospace Agency. Why the German Aerospace Agency? They don't have a lot of rockets, I think. So they do things like they figure out thermodynamics of energy consumption, and they're actually sort of the world leaders in this. Thank you, Germany. And we sort of worked with them. We actually worked with them. It took 5 years to basically come up with sort of the strategy that we put forward. And it's completely costed and modeled. And yes, it costs more money up front, but you actually save money in the long term, because the key to most of this is reducing energy use. And it also involves people in countries like Canada helping people in other countries to leapfrog from, rather than going through sort of the whole major coal burning phase, to go straight to the cleaner forms of energy generation. And rather than going with, you know, sort of the Edsel, the big cars, to go straight to really efficient public transit systems that get you where you need to go when you need to get there. To go to, when you have to use a vehicle, that it's electrically powered and electricity is coming from renewable energy. So we sort of modeled all of this out, and usually I'm, you know, as a joke once before I spoke, someone put on Imagine by John Lennon. But we can actually imagine it, we can make it happen, and we're particularly pleased because if you go to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change website, ipcc.ch, YCH, I don't know. They just put out a report on renewable energy. So you had a few hundred of the top scientists in the world who work on renewable energy come together. They reviewed 164 different scenarios that have been put forward in the peer-reviewed literature on how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions using renewable energy. They picked 4 of them to use as sort of like the best case studies to examine, you know, the different options. And the energy revolution was one of those, which has the climate denier blogosphere all enraged, because one of the 120 authors, one of the 120 lead authors of this, and there's all sorts of other supporting authors and reviewers, worked for Greenpeace. Clearly, it was a bias study. The fact that there was people there from Exxon and Chevron and others, you know, impossible. It must have been Greenpeace secretly. We actually were secretly masterminding the entire thing. All those scientists dancing to our very demands. But mostly what I just want to say was, what you're doing here is actually part of a global effort. There are similar things happening around the world, and it's these types of successes that we need to be able to point to for other communities saying, you can do this too. Because one of the biggest barriers we run into is people saying, okay, I want to do my bit, but really how much is my bit in this big world? And the more we have people doing their bits, and particularly coming together and doing it together, the more possible people think it is, and then the more likely it is to actually happen. So give yourselves a hand. You're part of the energy revolution, and in fact, you're in the forefront of it. So